All right, welcome everyone. I am Paul Lefevre, and I'm going to now be talking about the anatomy of an iOS app. So we're going to see some iOS stuff, see an actual app, and if all goes well, we'll actually attempt to submit this app to the App Store. So why Xojo for iOS? Jump right into that. First of all, you can leverage your existing Xojo skills. A lot of you have been using Xojo for a long time, and this is a fast way to get up to speed making something for iOS. Of course, Xojo gives you rapid development. Something other tools for iOS probably aren't quite as effective at. So it's a great way to not only make an iOS app, but do it quickly. Xojo is a much simpler IDE than Xcode, as, well, we're not even going to see all of Xcode. We'll use just a tiny portion of it. But again, when you're starting out or just need to make something that's maybe a companion to an existing app you have, this can be a much faster way to get that done. And it can also be a way to test the iOS waters. iOS is a new thing. It requires some new ways to design your apps, new ways to think about how you're distributing them, who's going to be using them, and this can be a good way to make something simple, to get out there in the iOS world and see how you feel that works for you. So what do you need if you're going to be using Xojo to make iOS stuff? Well, first of all, you need a Mac. There's no real way around that. So, as I look around the room here, that's not a problem for most people, but you're going to need a Mac. You're going to need to install Xcode 9. So you're going to have to grab that from the App Store, pull it down, install it. It's a big installation. Just downloading that is going to take longer than probably just installing Xojo in the first place. But you are going to need it because it includes in that big package the iOS simulator, which you're going to want for testing your iOS apps, and a few other utilities and frameworks. You're definitely going to want to make sure you're using the latest release of Xojo, 2018 Release 1. In particular, that adds the ability to support iPhone Xs. And when you're building your iOS apps, they're going to be 64-bit apps, and they're using the iOS 11 SDK. When you switch to 2018 Release 1, that's what gives you the iPhone X screen size support. And that, of course, is that little notch. A lot of you here have the iPhone X. I see on my app updates, right now my phone has 26 app updates, and still I bet a good portion of them are saying updated for iPhone X, so that the thing fills the screen appropriately. It's an ongoing process. Your iOS apps, however, will support iOS 9, 10, and 11. If you want to submit your app to the App Store, you're actually going to need an Apple development membership. That's like $100 a year or so, and that gives you access to creating the certificates that you need to be able to submit things to iTunes Connect and either give it away or price it or do whatever you want. So a little bit about the anatomy of your iOS app. Well, as we try to do, this is going to be a bit similar to desktop and web apps. There's going to be an app class, of course. There is something called a screen, and this can control whether your iOS app has just a single view or if it has tabs, or on the case of an iPad, if it's a split view. Views are the things that contain your displays. Your layouts, they're probably analogous to a window or a web page for those type of projects. And then, of course, the rest of your stuff is all what you work with. You can have your classes, your modules, your pictures, whatever else you normally include in a project, you can put in your iOS projects the same. So let's talk a bit about the app. This is similar to the desktop or web app. It's kind of that global thing that sits out there with some settings and you can put stuff on it. That looks like that in the inspector. It has a few event handlers, typical open event handler and the unhandled exception event handler, which is particularly important that you implement the unhandled exception handler to, at the very least, you're probably going to want to set a breakpoint or a break statement in there, so when you're testing in the simulator, if you get some exception, you actually get notified a bit, because iOS doesn't do like desktop operating systems and pop up a dialog or anything like that. It just, boom, kills your app. And then you either have to go digging through logs to figure out what happened, or you can catch something here. And there's also an event for low memory warning so that you can capture. And iOS will send this event off if the device is running low on memory, as essentially telling you, hey, your app is using a fair amount of memory and I need more memory, and I am shortly going to take yours, so give it away, give me some first. I'm asking you nicely, give me some memory before I just take it, essentially. So that's where you wipe any caches and do that sort of thing. And then this is also where you specify your default screens for the iPhone and the iPad. And you can have different screens set up for those so that, typically an iPhone app would probably be a single view, maybe portrait, but an iPad app might be a split, for example, that has, a view on one side that's a list of things and then then a detailed list that shows on the other side. And you can generate iPad-only apps just by setting the iPhone screen to none. So that means you built an app and it's only going to run on the iPad. It will only be available to iPads when they go to the store. You cannot create an app that is just iPhone only. Any iPhone app can run on an iPad, typically in some sort of scaled mode. So what is the screen? This lets you specify the devices that your app is going to run on and how the high-level layout. So you can specify the orientations and which ones are supported. So you can see here what it looks like in the inspector, a few different properties, the type of layouts and how you organize them. The content lets you specify whether you have a single view, whether you do a split, which is only available on an iPad, and whether you have tabs. And tabs, in the case of a phone, show up on the bottom here. So you can see this is an example of a contacts and a sales tab, what they look like. The view is where you do all your layouts. This is, like I mentioned, similar to a window or a web page. It's what a view might look like there with a few controls on it. And you just do your typical fun Xojo dragging and dropping and messing around and trying things out. To display views on the screen from an app like a button press or something like that, you just create the new view and then you do something that's called a push to. That has the view slide over the current view. And then it enables the built-in iOS back functionality. So if you have the navigation bar turned on, there'll be a back button on the top of the new view. The user can tap and that view will slide away and the original view will reappear, which is a common navigation pattern on the phone. So the navigation bar is what you can turn on. That's kind of like a title bar almost, you can think of it. But it does give you access to the back button and you can add your own buttons to the top as well. And like I mentioned, that is shown after you push something on. You can also have a toolbar on a view. A toolbar appears at the bottom in the case of a phone. And then the view is going to have your event handlers for handling, open events and things like that, for controlling how what you're going to show in there or any things you're setting up. And toolbars on iOS work a little differently than maybe you've seen, but there's a single event, toolbar pressed. So when any toolbar button is pressed, whether it's on the navigator or on the toolbar itself, this event is called. And in there, you have to check which button was the one that was tapped so that you can take an appropriate course of action. And then there's the usual events here for activating and closing and resizing, etc., so that you can do what you need to do as people are moving around and navigating your app. And I did that so you guys could see that a little more clearly. But simple code, but it's a little different than the show method, so I just like to point that out. So let's talk a bit about auto layout. This allows controls to reposition themselves when the device size or orientation changes, and a variety of other things. It's very, very powerful. You can set that in the inspector by adjusting properties of the controls, and you adjust them by referencing them to something else. So in this case, this control's left property is set to the parent's left property, in this case, probably the view, and then it's shifted over 49. So that tells you it's always 49 off to the left side. The same thing with the top, and it has a specific width set for it. So this little animation might be a little hard to see, but you can see here, and I think it'll loop, so you can get a couple times to let it run through. But what it's showing one thing that you can do here with auto layout pretty easily that's a little harder to do, like on the locking stuff that you have with desktop and web, where I have all these labels and controls that are aligned with each other. So if I change the left alignment of the top one, all of the controls align back to whatever I set that to. Because they're not locked to the parent, they're not locked to the view by a specific width or anything like that. They're locked to the top one. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility because you can relate the layout to other things on the layout. So iOS controls, there's quite a few to start with, and ones that match up pretty nicely with what you've seen in desktop and web projects. I don't think I'm necessarily going to go through and read all of these. I might call out a couple here. Date Picker is a control that is available on iOS, not actually in desktop and web. We get a lot of requests for that. But I believe Greg showed a Web 2.0 date picker, so that'll be coming there. But we have, matching things like segmented control and text field and slider. Those are pretty equivalent. Of course, there's a canvas, which is very nice for drawing your own types of controls and graphics and whatnot. There is a table that would be equivalent to maybe the list box you've used in the other project types. And let's see, a message box pops up a little dialog on the screen, and then scrollable area is another control that lets you have a bunch of stuff on it, and then you can just scroll the phone to get to other controls that are lower on the page. So you can essentially have a layout that's larger than the size of the device. And other features that aren't necessarily control related. Of course, we have SQLite on iOS. I love SQLite, in case anyone was unaware of that. And that is definitely available on iOS and works wonderfully. There's toolbars I mentioned. We have auto layout on iOS. You can play sounds in your iOS apps. There's HTTP sockets, a very important thing to use on iOS because typically you are going to be connecting to web services, which our little example app here we'll look at in a moment is using. File I/O, there's threading, there's introspection, JSON support, and we've added motion support and location support, and there's a sharing panel, which our little test app will also use, that lets you send out information to other apps on the device. Documentation on iOS is in the Dev Center for the time being, and there is a reference guide, a big list of the Xojo framework, and the iOS framework itself. And you can all head over there. There's lots of specific iOS dev topics. There's some examples of declares. And there's also about 50 or so projects that are included with Xojo itself that you can open up that demonstrate a lot of the controls. There's a few larger scale apps that you can see in there as well. So what app are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be looking at an app I called Cats Up. It's a pun. Laugh. It's a pun because it shows cats, but that's also ketchup. But I don't eat cats, but it's still, I think it's funny. My mother-in-law thought the name up. So anyway, this app is going to hit a web API, get cat pictures, and display them on the screen. Everybody loves cats, so I thought, this is it. This is my $1 million app idea. I was wrong. It also shows a little cat fact underneath there, so I don't know if you can read that, but it says under there are approximately 100 breeds of cat. So this is the version that's in the App Store right now. It's very simple. It shows a giant cat picture in the middle. It has a save button in the left that actually saves this picture to your photos library, and it has a sharing panel there that lets you also save it to the photo library or send it to another app such as Twitter or something like that. And there's the Cat Me button that when you hit it, sends out a WebSocket request to get another cat picture, which is then displayed in here. So this app's already in the App Store. My son helped me build this app. This was kind of an example father-son bonding thing when we sat down at the computer and came up with an app idea, and I showed him how to make an iOS app. So random cat pictures and cat facts. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the project. I've already updated it a little bit to change the UI with some newer features in Xojo, clean it up a little bit. And we'll look at just some of that briefly. Unlike some other people I've seen, the brave souls that do live coding in presentations, I am not one of those. So it's pre-updated. And so there'll be some UI changes. And then we'll actually deploy this to my device so we can see how that looks, and then we'll submit the new build up to the App Store, internet permitting, which seems like it should work. So before we do that, I want to talk about the process of submitting to the App Store. So when you do that, you've got to build your iOS app for the App Store. there's a little switch that will flip to do that. You'll then have to go to iTunes Connect and set up a new version. You're going to use Application Loader. That's kind of a tool that's built into Xcode. One of the reasons you have to have Xcode installed. That tool will let you upload your build to iTunes Connect. You have to go back to iTunes Connect, and then you will need to select the build you just uploaded. At this time, you can also configure TestFlight if you wanted to do beta testing on your app. And then you would add the build to your iTunes Connect entry for the version, and then you press the button to submit for your review, and then you wait. The last time I submitted an app for review was, I think, last month, and it was reviewed and approved in under 8 hours, which is a dramatic improvement versus when I first started doing this when it was like a week. So they seem to be on top of that now. So when you build for the App Store, you can see this switch that's right here. You're just going to click that, and that flips on the switch. You'll need to have your team selected here. Now, I'm not going through the process of generating all your certificates and everything like that on here, because that shows off, all kinds of private information, so the screen would be like half blacked out. And there's also a very lengthy step-by-step guide in the documentation how to do that. But generally, you just have to go to the Apple site, create your certificates, create an app ID. Right here I have the Catsup bundle identifier, that's the app ID, and then just download all that stuff and install it in Xcode and then on your device, and typically just works. If it doesn't work, you do it again and again sometimes. iTunes Connect looks a bit like this. So here you can see, this is what we'll see when we connect to the website in a moment. That's a little small, so I can point out that we're looking at a new version that is selected there, and that version has not yet been submitted to the App Store, but it's already filled out with what's changed in this version. I've got a new screenshot, a new iOS 10 size screenshot that they ask for now, and it'll have a few other things that are filled out in there. The App Loader app is a very simple app. It just lets you select your bundle that you've built, and then it runs a few little checks on it to make sure that you don't use any private APIs, and who knows what else they're checking in there, but it does that. And then once it's pretty happy that your app is kosher, it submits it up to iTunes Connect. And then iTunes Connect does its own little series of checks, again, mystery as to what exactly it's doing. And then eventually it will tell you your app's been optimized and accepted into iTunes Connect, where then you can then attach it to a version and then submit it. Lots of steps. And when it's actually accepted, you'll get this email. Today, we're not going to sit around here while I twiddle my thumbs and wait for Apple to send us the email that says the app has been accepted. I have one already pre-uploaded, but I'll upload another one. TestFlight, it's pretty much the same. It's part of iTunes Connect. It's going to be in the same navigator as your app itself, and it optionally lets you upload your app so that it can be beta tested. And when you do this, you put it into TestFlight, people that you add to the list for beta testing, and this can be internal people that are part of your account, or it can be external people. So you could just give out, you can get emails from people, and you can add them to the list here, and they would be able to beta test your app, which is pretty cool. But if you do people that are not part of your account, it does have to go through an approval process with Apple, so these aren't instantaneous. So if I wanted all of you to beta test this app, I could enter all your email addresses in here, and then maybe sometime tomorrow it would be available for you to beta test, but that's not super practical at this juncture. And when you do that, you see in the TestFlight app, the app becomes available in there, and the user can then actually have, this was already installed, but there'll be that little open button that's blue there, will say install, and they can tap that, and then it'll be available to use. And if you've never used TestFlight before, when you have a beta testing TestFlight app on your phone, it has a dot next to it. Like when you install a new app on your phone, it has a dot next to it, a blue dot. If you have a TestFlight app, it'll have a dot next to it. It's kind of orangish. I'm not great with colors, but I think it's orangish. And it doesn't go away. It's always there. The submit for review screen here, you have to scroll down. This is the iTunes Connect screen where you entered the version information and what was new and blah, blah, blah. But the thing you do is after you've uploaded your build to iTunes Connect, you have to scroll down to that section. You have to select the build that you just uploaded, and then that's the build that will be submitted off to the App Store for review, and then hopefully published. And that's what we'll be doing in just a moment. So let's see how all this works. We're going to take a look at this app real quick, and then throw it on the phone, and then get it to the App Store. All right, so here we have Cats Up. And you can see the phone screen. I don't really have, this isn't set up specifically for iPad, so it doesn't really look any different there. But the view is what really matters here. So you can see how this is set up. I have here a big canvas. In the middle, sorry, that's not a canvas. That is an image view that shows the image. I went with an image view instead of a canvas because the image view has this content mode for scaling the picture, which was nice and easy for me to choose rather than attempting to do all the math to scale the pictures myself in the canvas. I have a little, maybe you can't see it there, but there's a little progress wheel in the middle that I show while the picture is being downloaded from the internet. I have a text field down here that shows the cat fact. Down here at the bottom is a toolbar that has a button to get a new cat picture, some spacers, an info button that shows the actual source link for the picture, and then the share button right here. That's the general layout of the app. I'm not going to go into too many specifics of how it works. There is a socket right here that has a method on it, getCat, and this is just sending a GET request off to the cat API. That's a very clever named web service, and a pure genius that thought that up. But this person put together a cat API. It seems to scour Tumblr and places for images that have cats in them, and then returns back links. And I'm only using a high-level part of this API, but it has some ability to tag things as favorites and rate cat pictures and all this other stuff. So I can really jack up this app and add a lot of features to it when the money starts rolling in. So I'm just using a socket for that, and when the button is clicked, so if I open up the toolbar pressed event here, the get button is clicked, I just make it disabled, turn on the progress wheel, and then I call the API. And because this is asynchronous, the little spinner will happen for the second or so that it takes the picture to download. Now I'm going to click run here. Now it's always a little bit of gamble when I get a cat picture because these are kind of coming from Tumblr, right? So you never know exactly what's going to be in that picture with the cat. So I'm warning people ahead of time. I did the initial submission of this to the App Store was rejected by Apple because during the testing there was something inappropriate that popped up, and I was able to make a code change to clear that up and resubmit it, and all was fine. But that can happen. Yeah, the inappropriate thing wasn't in an image at the time. It was in one of the facts that came up. And it's smaller than I thought that would come up. It is not rated that. Again, some of this, too, for me is a test to see, you're kind of pushing at Apple to see what their, rules are for stuff. So you're like, how far can I do this? How deep are they testing for things? So that, because if this didn't get accepted, it wouldn't have, broke the bank for me. All right, so can I make that bigger? No, that's the opposite of bigger. Yeah, the new... No, not doing anything. See, when the projector here switched to my... let me turn that off there. Yeah, I do have the magnifier, so let me put it in the middle and do that. All right, so this is it running in the iPhone X simulator. So it's a little fuzzy because it's just zoomed. So that's a nice, safe picture. Got a cute cat hanging upside down. Yay. It's got a cat fact. The facts are just pulled from, I got an array of a bunch of text things, and I just pull up a random one. And then here at the bottom, you can see the toolbar. And if I click the button, info gives me the URL of the cat. Not that you can read that. And as my son told me, this URL is useless, Dad. No one can type that. And there's a get cat button that I can click to get another cat picture. Oh, cute cat, all right. And then I get the share button. And here I'm showing a message box that says, well, what do you want to share, the picture or the fact? And then I can choose one. And then since it's a simulator, I'm not going to have too many choices to share it to, but I could, on my actual phone, I'd have a ton of apps I could choose from here. Usually this would be like something, you might want to tweet it or something like that, or send it to email. So that's the extent of the app in its tiny glory here. All right, so we'll come back here and close that. So to build this, you can check your settings down here. So you have the shared build settings. This contains version information. So you can see here I have this set at version 1.21, and down here 1.21. Each time you submit a new build to iTunes Connect, these numbers need to change. So I haven't yet released 1.20 yet, and I've already uploaded the 1.20 build to iTunes Connect, so we'll see it already sitting in there when we go in. But I'm now going to submit the 1.21 build. So you'll need to do this because, as you're testing things and submitting things, at least this happened to me, I'm sure you were all perfect and whatnot, but I find something else after the fact, and I got to go and make a slight tweak. So I'll need to tweak this bug version to get that up so that iTunes Connect doesn't say, oh, you already uploaded that version, and then rejects it. So here, this is bumped up a little bit. And then on the iOS tab over here, you have your settings, and the bundle identifier is here. You got your team name, and then whether or not you're building for the App Store. So what I'm going to do first here is I'm just going to do a regular build, not for the App Store. And we'll drag that onto the phone so we can do, before I submit it off to the world, I probably should test it on a real device, right? So I've got a build here, which should show up in my anatomy one. No, I do want this one. So in my builds folder, right here, so I've got the app. The app is the one that is built locally to go right on there, so you can see that it's built and that has the correct time. So now I can go to iTunes. Sorry, not iTunes. I love iTunes. Today's Friday, New Music Day, so it's on my head. Xcode is what I want. Although if you've ever noticed, you cannot install Xcode if you have iTunes open. The more you know. All right, so I had Xcode and I lost it. Let's see, Xcode. So I want to go to Xcode here, and I've just built my app and I want to put it on my phone. So I'm going to open up the Devices and Simulators window here, and we're going to see my phone, and it already has a couple apps on here that I've been testing. And this is my phone here. It already has Cats Up on it. And if I tap on it, you can see it's running the old version. So what I can do now is drag this app down here to the Files section and say replace. It's just going to replace the App Store version I have installed here. And then I can run it again. Cross your fingers on the picture. Oh, there we go. And you can see it's now running the new version. Yeah, and that's bigger. And I have to actually interact with it here, so you can see how it runs there. And I got cat picture. Yeah, I could tweet it. Oops, wrong button.
So that useless URL dialog, did you add a button to send that off to Safari?
I could totally. The question was, for that useless info button here that's showing the URL, could I add a button to send that off to Safari or do other things to it? Yeah, totally. I could The share button even has an ability to share a URL. Well, I didn't add that feature, but I could have put that in. I could have the info button send it to Safari. I could do it whatever I wanted, really. But showing a message box was the easiest thing, the least I could do, literally, right? So that's what I chose. All right, so it looks like, my exhaustive testing here, our app is rock solid, and it's ready to get submitted to the App Store. So let's go ahead and do that. So I will come back here, and I will flip the build for the App Store switch on, and I will do another build. Yes?
Drag it into the file section window of Xcode. It looked like it loaded on the simulator. Did it also load it directly to your phone?
No, it shouldn't be on the, sorry, the question was when I dragged it into the,
He thinks the simulator. You were actually showing your phone.
yeah, when I dragged it here in Xcode, it loaded it here. This is actually a QuickTime mirror of my phone, not the simulator.
If you hold up your phone.
This is the simulator here.
So
Yeah.
You actually had QuickTime Player there.
Yeah, this is QuickTime Player here that's showing a mirror of my phone. Yeah, the magic of all this stuff. I'm actually surprised it's working so far. All right, so this finished building here. So now I can go back to Xcode. Well, actually, let's take a peek in iTunes Connect first. So I'm going to log in here. Assuming I typed that right. Felt like I didn't. That's why I said that. Great. Mental note, change password after session. All right, here we go. So in iTunes Connect, you log in here. I'm going to click My Apps to get to the section. And then I have my Cats Up app. So here you can see in iTunes Connect, the overall app information is showing up here. This is just a free app that anybody can download, of course. Yeah, that should work, right? Is that better? All right, there we go. Thank you. All right, so here in the Prepare for Submission section, you saw what I showed you earlier in the screenshot. I have the new version 1.2 already entered in here. If I were creating a new version, I would just click this link down here, version or platform, and I would tap it and then choose iOS, and then it would add the version here, and I could fill this information in. But I've already done that. I put in a couple notes for what's new features. I generated a new iPhone 10 screenshot before I only had iPhone Plus and regular size screenshots. And I just generate the screenshots right from the simulator. In the file menu, there's a save screenshot, and it'll save it to your desktop. And you can put a lot of stuff in here, including a video, if you're going hog wild with your marketing. But I, again, did the least I could do. It is, yes, isn't it? It's a lot of effort for cats. So as I scroll down here, I'm eventually going to get to the build section. And here I can select a build. And so what we're going to do now, I'll come back here after, but we'll go to Xcode to submit a build. But I don't think we're going to wait around for the one we're going to submit.
Is there a requirement that you put a website in this iTunes Connect or how do they?
Is there a requirement that you have to put a website or anything for support? I'm not aware that there's any sort of requirement for that. There is. All right. Philip says there is. I haven't read through and memorized all their stuff, but if you forget and there is a requirement, they'll let you know.
You just need a website URL for you. The thing you don't require is a privacy policy. You can use the default one, or you can have your own.
All right. So Philip's noting that you don't need a privacy policy, just a website. You can use the default or provide your own. So now we're back here in Xcode is the app I have selected. So I'm going to come up here to the developer tool thing, and the developer tool I want is application loader. And here I want deliver my app. And I will choose the IPA file in this case. This is the one I just built. That's the full package that gets sent up to the App Store, and I will click Open on that.
You realize that if you set the price for this app to $1, you could get $50 just in this session.
Chuck is suggesting I raise the price on Cats Up and take advantage of a captive audience. I couldn't do that to you guys. That would be terrible.
Paul, you realize that if you have fixed bugs in this app, you will literally affect tens of people.
Yes, Philippe is making fun of the fact that this probably is not a very popular app. I can confidently say that in the year or so this has been on the App Store, it's in the double-digit downloads. So you can see here it's got the app name. It shows the new version, and so I can just click Next. Sorry, that probably, actually it's a little bigger there, so you can see that. So it's doing some processing here, sending some, it says API usage to iTunes Connect, waiting for response, now authenticating with the App Store. Assuming that's all approved, then it will begin an actual upload. Verifying metadata with the App Store, verifying assets with the App Store, and that's probably verifying my icon sizes are correct and things like that. So now this is elapsed for 28 seconds.
You didn't spend the $10, did you?
I didn't spend the $10. Was it?
For the high-speed internet.
I'm busted. I've been caught that I didn't spend the $10 for the high-speed internet. I should have probably switched it to the LTE on my phone. Actually, it's not uploading yet, though. It is still verifying assets with the App Store. Once that is finished, I believe will just automatically start uploading, which is usually pretty quick. There we go. Now it's automatically uploading to the App Store.
So what's the memory footprint of this compared to if you did the same thing? Got a rough idea of how much more it would be?
What is the memory footprint? The memory footprint of what?
Of the app.
Of the app.
If compared to, let's say I built this just using Xcode.
Ah, I see. So compared to Xcode, what is the memory footprint of the app while it's running on the device versus using Xojo? Well, I can't say. I haven't built it in Xcode. So I don't have a rough thing. I mean, I don't see why there would be anything significant from a memory size difference.
Can you get the size of your app? Oh, it's good. Can you get info on the app size?
Yeah, well, it says here it uploaded 3.5 megabytes.
That sounds about easy. It's less than
So, yeah, that's the storage space. So I'm going to click Next here. It's just going to tell me it's done, and Apple thanks me for the submission. And I screenshot that and print it and put it on my wall. All right, so now we've uploaded the build to the iTunes Connect, but we still can't use it. So if I come back here and I hit Select Build, you can see here it shows the new one that we just uploaded and that it's processing. So I could either stand here and regale you in stories of how the Red Sox are going to win the World Series this year or something like that. But I'm not going to do that because, and there's a non-zero possibility that I never get this email during this session, or that it comes back with some error and then I start panicking because I don't know what it could possibly be or how to fix it. So I'm going to pick this one and submit the one that I built earlier this month, and click Done. And I need my whoopsies. I think my zooming has messed up my scrolling, so sorry, I got to zoom out, I think, here. There we go. So I now have, that's right, I can't see the save buttons, so Apple's site here is not responsive. So now I can save that. And I can click Submit for Review. And I got an issue. What's the issue? App information. Oh yeah, this was highlighted in red. App name can't be longer than 30 characters. Oh, I think that's a new thing because this is the actual name of it on the App Store. I took it from all the scammy stuff that's out there where there's a 50-character name, so maybe that's an Apple thing there.
You just change the and to an ampersand.
I hate ampersands. I'm not changing the and to an ampersand. It's like they give me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like them. All right, so let's go back here. And let's try again with a submit. All right. Submission includes the following changes. The name, yes. All right, now I have to say, am I using an advertising identifier? No, I'm not tracking anything like that, so I can click no here and click submit again. And that's it. You can see up here the status now says waiting for review.
Now we wait.
And now we wait, yes. I'm getting notifications on my phone that tell me that it's been submitted. See if I can show those that came up here. So you can see I got these 2 notifications here that the bill, look, I got the email for the 121 build, so that was fast. And then I got my iTunes Connect app is telling me that it also finished. So it hasn't said much about the status. So what's going to happen now is throughout the day, I'll be checking my phone every 30, 40 seconds. And, but eventually I'll get a notification that says your app status has changed to in review. And then I'll be like, yeah. So I just got a notification here. It says my app status has changed to waiting for review. So we already knew that. But I'll get it's changed to in review, and then I wait around there, and then I will eventually get a status that says your app has been rejected because of an offensive cat picture, or your app is now approved and will appear in the App Store. And then when that happens, I will tweet it. So there you have it. That's the process there, and it actually worked without a hitch, so that is super surprising.
Now you just sit back and wait for the money to roll in.
Yeah, I sit back and wait for the many, many downloads and the money to roll in. So, any questions on that whole thing? Yes, Jim in the back.
So let's say you have an app that you want to just put on your phone or your own iPad and don't use it. And I understand your CAD certificate expiring. Is there any way to get around having to rebuild every year?
So the question is, if you just have your own app, you don't need to put it in the App Store, and you just want it on your phone, is there any way to get around the fact that those certificates are going to expire regularly and your app will stop working? Not that I've seen. Philip probably has done this and has an idea.
There's one way. You can get an enterprise certificate. You can get an enterprise certificate. Those do not expire, but they are expensive.
All right, so Philip is noting enterprise certificates are an expensive option, and it sounded like you wanted to avoid the expensive options, but...
There's a possibility, and I haven't looked into this, but they have kind of some kind of special deal for nonprofits. And that is, in effect, the enterprise certificate, but for a nonprofit for internal use only. And so if you could pretend you were doing something for your local science museum.
All right, Bob is suggesting a perhaps borderline unethical thing where you pretend you're a nonprofit. I'm not going to endorse that, but Apple is very stringent on company-related stuff, so I don't know how.
The thing to do would be to find a real nonprofit.
Find a real and slip them a couple bucks. There you go. There you go. Yeah, in the back, Steve. All right, so Steve says they're still expiring after a year, and he has an enterprise developer program membership. So yeah, Lewis, what do you think? You got a thought?
You just put it on your phone right there.
Yes, but it'll expire.
Yeah, a year from now, if I don't do anything, well, maybe not even a year from now. It's on my phone now, but the certificates I've generated have an expiration date that are on my phone. So eventually, it's not going to launch anymore. And it doesn't even give you an error or anything. You just go to tap on it, and it just immediately goes back to the springboard.
And data copies expire in 90 days.
Yes, Gordon is noting that it is important to remember that if you do TestFlight stuff, those all expire in 90 days. So you have to do a new TestFlight build, or at that point, hopefully you're done beta testing and you've submitted to the App Store and they can download the full version.
Just one comment I had, an iPad supervisor mode, a single app running, and it expired. And so every time you turn on the iPad, it went into this crazy loop that tried to load an app that has expired certificate. But the iPad is a single app mode, so
So Jim is noting to be a little cautious if you set up single user mode to maybe get a kiosk app or something going, and then that app expires, your iPad is going to be in a kind of a state of flux and might not be able to run too well. He had to wipe the iPad. That did not have a happy ending. All right, Philippe lost his train of thought, so we'll move on. Yes.
So when you're submitting that app, is there a way to say, I don't want it to see the whole public, it's just for my customer?
So the question is, this is a common question, if you're submitting to the App Store, can I restrict who gets to see it in any way? You can restrict it by region, US, and not allow anyone in other countries to see it or whatever, but otherwise, enterprise is the way to go. TestFlight, some people use TestFlight for that. Philippe, you got a thought?
Right, so what I thought was you could put it on the App Store and then you can remove it himself from every region. So that the people who get it, download it, and then they can still get updates, but nobody else can download it.
All right, so Philippe's suggestion, now I don't know if it's a suggestion, but this is an idea, because it's a bit of a race, but you submit it to the App Store, everyone can see it, you give your users a countdown and say download it immediately, and then you remove it from the App Store so no one else can grab it. They'll have it, and then any updates you push up will show up for them as updates that they can get. That seems really hard to manage, though. Enterprise is how Apple typically wants you to do what you described, though.
There's also a B2B App Store.
Yes, I haven't looked at that one at all. There's a B2B App Store,
Only a few
but
customers that specifically, you have to have a DUNS number so you can create that B2B App Store, and they have to have a DUNS number so they can be on your B2B App Store, and then they will only see that. And it'll work normally.
yeah, so the non-App Store distribution methods are obviously way more complicated. Apple wants you to sign different agreements with them and talk to them and get all that, ironed out. So that's the way it is. Yeah, in the back, Steve. Oh wait, I'll need you to yell it louder because I can barely hear you. All right, so Xojo iOS apps support notifications of any sort. Well, they support it, but there's no built-in support. So you'd have to use declares or a library or something like that. There's also a third-party service, pushover, that I've used to send out notifications from an app, but you have to have a separate pushover app installed, and it kind of handles that. But yeah, certainly there are plenty of people. I believe the Packer app has notification support. Yeah, Fred.
So your app is written with the Xojo framework as API 2.0 is implemented. Are you going to have to rewrite all that?
So the question is, as API 2.0 is implemented, am I going to have to rewrite all the app? Well, I'm going to have to change the types of things. I'm using the Xojo.net.http socket. That would need to switch over to the new one, which whatever that becomes. Obviously, I'm using text in here, so I'll have to switch all that over to string. I believe they mentioned they're talking about some possible way to open an older project and have it auto-convert some of that stuff for you to the new format. I mean, the code itself, I don't expect changes. It's more of the naming and the classes that would need changing. So.
I thought the conversion was for web apps.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, if we can do it for web, we can do it for iOS. I'll tell Jeff to do that. I'm going to jump to the back. I think Justin had a question. Yeah, so Justin's pointing out some of the open source libraries. Actually, I didn't include them on the slide, but I do encourage you to go to the Dev Center, search for the open source page, and right at the top there's an iOS section, and there's at least 4 open source iOS libraries that add quite a bit of functionality. And Jeremy Leroy himself added a new library just this week that he had me add to the list that he just published, so there's some stuff in there. There was another one here, yes? The question was about Bluetooth support. Yeah, nothing built into Xojo has Bluetooth support at this point. That would be maybe in the open source stuff. All right, Philippe, one more.
Xojo question for the IDE. I noticed that there's a app version, so like 121 in your case, but there was also the build number, which also was 121 in your case. I didn't notice if there were 2 different fields or if it was just Xojo was picking the same field for both.
Oh yeah, so Philippe is asking if the fields were different. They are different, and they don't need to be the same. So right here, you've got the different numbers that are specified here, and then here I can type whatever I want. They don't. Whoops, if I click the right mouse button.
Okay, right.
So yeah, that doesn't.
The version field, Apple requires you to have this be a number that increments, but it doesn't matter what the number is. You could start at 100. Next build is 101, 102, 103. Then when you go to your build 122, you can restart at 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Right, yeah. Apple just, as Philip is noting, the numbering scheme just has to continually increase. Otherwise, they yell at you and say something's already there, typically. All right, I think we'll wrap up for lunch. Thanks, everyone.